Hello, everybody. This is Tuesday's class for Applied Math Grade 11. And yesterday, we took a set of class grades from Ms. Potter's stats class, and we turned that into a frequency chart, and then we graphed the frequency chart by hand. Let's see, where did we do that? Oh, there it is. It's down here. There it is. We got that lovely histogram. And then, of course, on the top of it, we just made what you call a frequency polygon. But frequency polygons aren't a big part of this course. You have to be able to make histograms. But as I promised yesterday, that's the last one we'll do by hand from now. And then usually when I say that, I get a cheer from the class. It's like, good, because that was a drag. But everybody was like, no, that was kind of fun. Hey, we made a graph. It's like, no. Sorry, this is all about using the technology. So we're going to use technology to do this. And if you take a look at your notes, let me open the notes package here. Where is the notes package? Where are you, notes package? There we go. MPS chapter 4. There we go. And ignore that. No, that's not what we want. That's your last test. Hang on. Where is the notes package? Chapter 4 test. Oh, there we go. Statistical reasoning. Chapter 5. That's what I'm looking for. There. Okay, so scroll past that page where we drew our graph, which is right here in the histogram. So scroll past that, and you'll get to the instructions on how we're going to make this graph online. So we're going to use yet another, this is our third different online calculator. This one's called the histogram generator. So you can Google on your device imathas.com, or you know what, I bet if you just Google iMath and histogram generator, you will get basically this. Let me just go back to my internet here. You will get this. This one works really nicely on the phone. Notice it doesn't even take up much of the screen when you're on a PC or a laptop. So look for histogram generator. And again, feel free to just Google imathas.com and histogram generator, and you'll get this lovely histogram maker here. Okay, so while you're looking for that, let's take a look at the instructions from the notes. The instructions from the notes say we want to group the data into the categories of the 10s, right? Students in the 20s, students in the 30s, students in the 40s. Then we'll need to enter the settings on the left. Now, when we graph this by hand, remember I wanted to avoid that awkward, where does a number right that ends in a 0 end up? If I said that my range, or my class interval went from 40 to 50, then 50 to 60, well then where does the number 50 go? Does it go to the one on the left, or does it go to the one on the right? That makes life kind of hard. So to avoid that, I said, you know what, let's just make the intervals at 0.5s. Then all the data falls nicely between all the 0.5s. Here's how you do this on this particular piece of technology. Look closely at how we're going to enter this. So first of all, has everybody found the histogram generator? Okay, so if you're on the histogram generator, we're going to enter the data like so. We're going to say that our first lower class limit, let's include 0 to 10. We didn't have any data in 0 to 10, so we'll go from 0. Our class width is 10, right? Every class goes from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. So the width of every interval is 10. How many classes are there? There's 10 classes, right? We want the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. So we're going to make this 10 different classes. For class boundaries, use the lower class limits. And under our class here, it's going to, well, first of all, click Prepare Frequency Table and take a look. It actually does it for you. When you click Prepare Frequency Table, take a look at how this thing makes sure that the number 10 if it was one of the grades, doesn't end up in the first column with numbers like 7, 8, or 9. Can you see this? Where I'm hovering my cursor? Notice the first class goes from 0 to 10, but there's no equals on this one, so it doesn't include 10. This class goes from 10 to 20, but notice there's no equals on the less than symbol, so it doesn't include the 20. See how nicely that works? And then we enter in our data from our frequency table. So what was our frequency table again? Our frequency table was 4825, yada, yada, yada. So we're going to enter that data into this histogram generator. So we didn't have anything from 0 to 10, so this is a 0. But then our first data was the 10s. There was 4 numbers in the 10s. There was 8 numbers in the 20s. There was 2 numbers in the 30s. There was 5 numbers in the 40s. There was 7 numbers in the 50s. There was 7 numbers in the 60s. There was 6 numbers in the 70s. There was 6 numbers in the 80s. And then from 90 to 100, we actually had, not including, so if there was a person with a graph of a score of 100, they actually wouldn't be in this graph, and I'd have to make the number of classes 11 so that there'd be a place for the hundreds people to be, but there was no hundreds on this one. So there was 3 people in the 90s. And then when you hit graph it, I'll give you a sec to catch up and put in the data. So why did I put 10 for the class width? Because every category is going to be 10 wide, right? From 0 to 10, from 10 to 20, from 20 to 30. And by the boundary being the lower class limit, that means that it includes the bottom number in the boundary, but it doesn't include the top number. So it includes the 10, but it doesn't include the 20. See the logic on how that works? This is a nice little grapher. This is such an easy one to use compared to how, wait till you see Desmos. Desmos is great, but it doesn't do histograms very well. Yep?
So the way we set it up, is that how it's going to be for every...
Well, different, okay, the question that you probably didn't hear at home is the way we set it up here the way it's going to work for all of them? Well, not necessarily. We have to learn how to use the technology for each individual question that we're doing. But in this case, it works for this one, let's put it that way. All right, are we ready to hit graph it? When you hit graph it, you get a lovely, looks just like the one we did in class by hand. I don't know, the one we did by hand even kind of has a charm to it. It's pretty nice, actually. But this one looks definitely a little more professional, let's say that. But notice it's exactly the same. We have an extra category here that we didn't have on our graph. We didn't bother graphing 0 to 10 because there was no data there. What's that? There was nothing from 0 to 10, so we didn't bother. So our first bar is this guy. But there it is. That's the data graphed. Here's all the people in the 10s. Here's the people in the 20s, the people in the 30s, the 40s, etc. So there's our first type of graph for a histogram. We can use the histogram generator online. It's nice and easy to use. You're going to have a couple of homework questions where you can try playing with this one. But what if we wanted to graph it straight from the raw data? What I mean by that is, what if we wanted to make a histogram just from the data without having to bother with the tally chart? We can do that, and Desmos can do it for us, but it's a little complicated. So we're going to run through it together. So go back to the notes, and let's read what it says in the notes. The notes say that once you're done, there we go. If we want to make a histogram from raw data without doing a tally chart, we can use Desmos. Desmos actually doesn't graph tally charts. If we wanted to graph from the tally chart, we'd have to actually enter, like for example, let me just show you how clumsy Desmos can be. If we wanted to graph, remember this one? Way back here. Why didn't we do this one on Desmos? Because remember, this means that there was 12 25s, there was 14 26s. If you were wanting to do that on Desmos, there's no way to group the data like that on that program, so you'd actually have to sit there and enter the number 25 12 times. You go 25, comma, 25, comma, 25, comma. Then you'd have to enter the number 26 14 times. Bleh. So that's why we found something better we used this guy at HackMath, which has a very nice frequency calculator for us. You just have to type that little letter F. That was nice. So that's what we did yesterday with that one. Today, we'll use Desmos, because Desmos is cool. We're going to use it for lots of other things as the course goes along. But this time, we can't graph it from a tally chart. We have to go back to the raw original data. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go to Desmos. So everybody open Desmos. So let me get Desmos opened. Okay, so Desmos. And we are going to open a set of data. You can call it whatever you like. We'll call it A. And we usually use capital letters for that. And then hit the equal sign, and then hit the square bracket. That just told Desmos that, aha, we're going to enter a list of numbers. And then I think we'll pause the video while we enter the numbers from the data. So the numbers are, again, the data that we have originally. Not the tally chart, but the original data. Let me erase my tick marks here. Oh, that's not working. There we go. This data here. So we'll pause the video while we enter these 48 numbers into Desmos, because that's not a very exciting video watching me enter 48 numbers. Okay, so take your time to do that on your phone, and we'll be right back. I'm back. I forgot to tell people that when you enter data in Desmos, you should use commas. So I'm going to totally cheat and do this fast. I'm going to use the keypad on the keyboard rather than this crappy laptop one. So it's 16, comma, I'll go down is easier, 18, comma, and when you actually do this, notice that before you hit the comma again, it's counting how many data points for you, which is kind of nice. So when you hit 48, you're going to be done. Okay, so go back and type in your data. We'll be right back. Now we're back. We're back. Most people are done typing in their data. So here we have now 48 pieces of data. They're raw data. It's not grouped into a tally chart, but we want the same histogram we got from our histogram generator and the one that we did by hand in yesterday's class. So here's what we're going to do. In cell 2, type in that you want a histogram. You can actually type in the word histogram. Notice as soon as it recognizes something, it turns it into Times New Roman font for you. If that's too much typing for you, you don't want to type the word histogram, you can go into functions and distribution, and there's where histogram is. So histogram, now, to make it do a histogram, you have to open up, and notice when you open the bracket, it tells you what it wants in the bracket. The first thing it wants is the data set. Well, I only have one data set. I have data set A. So A goes here, data set A, comma, and then I called them class intervals. They call it bin width. How wide are the bars again? 10. They're 10 wide. 3 was how many we counted when we drew it on paper. But they're 10 wide, right? You go from 0 to 10, 10 to 20. They're 10 wide. So we put 10 here. Then set bin alignment to left so that it knows, once again, that a number like 10 belongs with the 10s. The number 20 doesn't belong with 19 and 18. It belongs with 21, 22. So that's a left alignment. And then, well, you can sort of see the graph. It's kind of crappy looking right now. But we can fix that. See this little plus sign inside of a magnifying glass? That's zoom fit. This doesn't work perfectly either, but it'll look better. There, that's better. But I think it's still kind of squooshed. So what we can do is we can go up to the settings, graph settings, it's this wrench thing, and say, okay, I don't need all this negative space down here, so there's no reason for the y-axis to go into negative 42. I can make the y-axis go to negative 4. There we go, that's better. And I don't need the y-axis to go all the way up to 40 when the highest number I have is 8. Why don't I change the y-axis to like 10? There we go. Compare that to what we had on paper. And here it is on paper. Compare it to on paper and compare it to what we got on graph the histogram generator online.
There you go.
And as you can see, except for the fact that it's still a little wider looking, it's the exact same graph.
How did you get that?
How did I get that? I don't know. I just did exactly what I said I was doing. Did you put this to left?
This is pretty much right.
Okay, so here, I'll start over. I'll start over. Okay, here's your data. Okay, everybody with me? I'll go through the steps again. Here's the data. Okay, this time instead of typing histogram, I'll go get it from the functions. Function, distribution, histogram. Oh, except I don't want it there.
How do you save it?
Sorry, I want it down here in cell 2. There we go.
How do you save the x-axis and y-axis again?
I'll show you in a sec. So the question is, how do you change the x and y axis? I'll show you in a sec. So first of all, histogram. And again, I want the data set A, and I want my bin width. See, right now the bin width is 1, so it's making a bar for every single number, which is kind of goofy. I want it to group the numbers in groups of 10. But notice this doesn't look like my graph just yet. How come? Because it's counting 20 in with 11 to 19, like so 11 to 20. I want 20 to be with the 20s, so I want a left alignment. In other words, the numbers on the left stay with the 10s in the left place. Okay, how did I change that? So, okay, look at this. If I go home, I can't see anything. If I hit zoom fit, see this little plus thing? That gives you kind of that, which is again kind of lame. But at least it's better. At least I can see where all the x values are. But to make the y values all pretty and so I can compare them better, I click up here where the wrench is. And for the y-axis, I change what the y-axis is. Again, there's no reason to go down to -42. There's no data that far down. So I just left it at -4. I always leave a little bit of negatives. That way the line, the x-axis, isn't right at the bottom of the screen where it's hard to see. And then how high does it have to go? It certainly doesn't have to go up to 50. Right? 10 is plenty, because 8 was my biggest number, right? So there we go. And that's how I got it to look all lovely. Okay? But notice, I had to enter every data point. I could not go from my tally chart, or my frequency chart, to a graph on Desmos. Desmos only handles raw data, which is a pro and a con. So there we go. So there's the two technologies for graphing histograms. Now, for the people who are using calculators, okay, let me just pause for a sec while we get the calculator open. Okay, and we're back. Okay, so for the people who are graphing this on the TI calculator, you can go back to your tally chart, right? The TI calculator can graph grouped frequency data table. So you go to your tally chart where, again, the 10s was 4, the 20s was 8, the 30s was 2, the 40s was 5. So that's the data that you enter into here. And I just called this 10, 20, 30, 40 because, again, you could call it even class 1, class 2, class 3. It doesn't matter what you call it. This is the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, and there's the data.
Excuse the interruption.
Hello?
Is Kate there?
Yes.
Can she
Certainly. Okay, so like I was saying, we're going to graph this data, and here's my calculator. And here's how we graph. First of all, don't confuse your calculator by trying to graph algebra and statistics at the same time. Make sure you have nothing in your algebra Y list. You weren't graphing any equations that you forgot about in there. Then go to stat plot, which is second function and the Y button. And you get to this screen here. When you're on this screen, you have to turn stat plot 1 on. So just move your cursor over until you get to stat plot 1 and turn it on by hitting enter when the cursor's over it. Then select the type of graph you want. We want this one, the histogram. So hit enter when you're on the histogram. Once you've hit enter on a histogram, you'll notice that, actually let me start over. Suppose I wasn't on the histogram. It's going to say what's the X list, what's the Y list, usually. But when you go to the histogram, it's going to say, what's the X list? And then I entered L2 for the frequency. I think the default setting for the frequency is 1. And if you have a 1 here, change this to L2 because your frequencies are in list 2. Then, once all of this is set this way, hit graph. And you should get your graph. Now, make sure that your window is set properly. So your window, it doesn't, X minimum was 10. Remember, there was no numbers before 10 in our data. It doesn't really matter what the X maximum is. I mean, 100% is the biggest test mark you could get in this data. But this is important. Make sure that your scale represents how wide each bin is or each class interval is. So that has to be set at 10 or you're not going to get the right graph. And if you take a look, the graph is the same as the one we had, right? The first bar went up to, what was it again? The first bar went up to 4. The second bar went up to 8. The next bar was 2, then a 5, then 2 7s, 2 6s, and a 3. So there it is. That's using technology to graph. And now we're going to try some, so is there any more examples in this part of the booklet? I don't think there is, right? After this, it's the notes that kind of explain the 2 online ones. And then that's it. So now we're going to try some from our textbook. And we're going to use basically whichever technology kind of we're more comfortable with. All right, so that's the end of our video. Thanks for watching.